So do you like the insert topic here, where we discuss insert topic here? All right.
Yeah,
So here we go. So we are talking to a former association president, associate real estate broker extraordinaire, diversity, equity, and inclusion leader, and short sale guru, and mama, and my friend, Crystal Hawkins-Syska. Welcome to our humble little broadcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Phil.
I'm pretty excited about it, actually. Okay, so there's no opening question, but I always want to know, how was your journey in real estate started? What'd you do before you did this? Because nobody majors in real estate in college that I've ever met. So,
yeah, very few.
Yeah.
There's I think I only know maybe one or two people who actually majored in real estate and then made a career.
Yeah.
So I think
exist.
I fall into the majority where I was doing something else and then came upon real estate. So my background actually is in communications, English, and broadcast journalism, in fact. So when yes, actually. Yes.
We are fellow English degrees. Is that our?
Yes, we are.
Did not know that.
So, and essentially I worked in public relations, doing media kits and for some not-for-profits and so forth. And I even had a job for a while working for a small accounting firm. You know how you might go to school for one thing, but you don't always end up in what you studied. And essentially I ended up making a friend who I will name Freddie Vargas. He's the reason I got involved in real estate. I know you know Freddie very well. And almost 2 decades ago, it's kind of scary to say that, he approached me and said, have you ever considered real estate? And honestly, I hadn't. I had only thought about my own experience dealing with real estate agents. And at that time, my thought was, I don't want to be a well-paid chauffeur. Yucking around showing people properties and not quite exactly listening to my clients and so forth. So there's that.
Okay.
But he actually encouraged me, no, take a look at this from a different perspective. One day you're going to want a family, right? And it's very expensive to live where we are. Wouldn't it be nice to cover your salary as well as your husband's? If something should change, should you have a change of life circumstance and be able to take care of your family? And at that time, I didn't have any children or anything like that. So I was like, that's a great thought. And thus started my journey in real estate. The first thing I did actually was work for a property management company in Greenwich, Connecticut. Okay. So I learned real estate from that end. Yeah. And they had the Greenwich Housing Authority, which is very different from the New York City Housing Authority, I would say. And that really was a great introduction to what it was like to run a building, to deal with tenants. I was dealing with leases, collecting rents, making sure that repairs were done on the building, also keeping up to date with some of the housing codes. So I learned it from that standpoint. And then I said, you know what? I think I can get into sales. And that's when I really worked on getting my license. And the rest is history. One thing I appreciate about Freddie is when I first started, he told me, or he had me for the first 6 months only work on co-op deals. And the reason why is he said that is the hardest entry point of real estate in terms of the transaction itself. There's more moving parts. He said, if I can master that, then the rest is gravy. And I think he was absolutely correct about that.
Yeah, I mean, you stand on your head to do a, could be a $90,000 deal, and you work harder because there's, so many more hoops to jump through. And yeah, he was right. He was right.
Yep.
Was Freddie your first broker? Was he your first?
Yep, Freddie was my first broker. So I did a short stint. Actually, I joined him as a salesperson with a real estate company he was with at the time. I stayed there shortly with him, and then he went out on his own, and I was his first agent. And it was a great experience, honestly. It was a great experience.
Okay. So you've been with Keller as long as I know you, and that's a long time.
Yes.
I've known you well before 2010, 2005, 6, 7, something around there. What year did you originally get licensed?
So I got licensed in 2003. Is
2003.
when
Okay.
I originally got licensed, and I joined Keller Williams in 2007, I believe. I think I just actually made an anniversary, I think, with KW. It's like was it 2007? Yeah, I think it was 2007 I joined them.
Happy anniversary.
Yeah,
So
thank you.
when I consider the multifaceted work property management entails, and then I look at the commercial transaction world, it absolutely astonishes me that the people that do such wildly different things all have to sit through the same licensure class, and the licenses are identical. And there should probably be a different license for commercial. Just my observation, because it's all different. It's like a different universe, different industry.
I would concur with you on that.
Yeah.
I think I was lucky that I went the direction I did, because I bought a breadth of information of knowledge from working in property management and understanding that side. But it definitely was a very different animal to get into residential sales. Yet I think that my background definitely in the property management side absolutely helped me, because it dealt with the personalities. Which is, we're still in a people business, even though this is this transactions and we're dealing with brick and mortar.
People business. Yeah.
So I was happy to know that.
Are you licensed in Connecticut also?
No, I'm not licensed in Connecticut currently. No.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. Okay. So Keller Williams in 2007, right? And that's probably around the time that I met you. And of course, we're plugging along. We know, remember when everybody was talking about soft landing, right? There's going to be a soft landing. The real estate market, the real estate bubble is going to pop, but we're working on a soft landing.
Yes.
And in 2007, I had a good year. I bought a house, signed a lease on an office, and then, of course, the whole subprime, domino, the whole thing implodes. Soft landing my ass, right? So the whole thing implodes. Now, the niche that I knew you at initially was short sales.
Correct.
Yeah. And a lot of us that did short sales did so out of necessity. It was just where the market was going. What specifically got you into short sales? Because you're still doing them. You've closed them recently. I still do them where I see them, but like you closed one recently.
Yes, I sure did. And I got some more in the pipeline. So there were two things that got me involved in short sales. A part of it was definitely the market of the moment. There was definitely that. I do credit Mark Boylan's. I do give him a lot of credit that he was the person who literally came to me, who was like, listen, you have to get trained to do this. I found someone who's very reputable, runs a very tight organization. You have to do this. So I was like, okay. The other part of that is, from the market I could see emerging, there seemed to be a disproportionate amount of individuals of color who were being impacted by the subprime market, who were now in threat of losing their homes.
Yeah.
So there was definitely a morality portion about, I wanted to help people. And I would say that was the bigger drive. And through that, it led me into definitely different neighborhoods, different types of properties. It expanded my whole understanding and perception of market.
Yeah.
Because of it. I mean, there were individuals that, once this was all said and done, remember Mr. Bernie Madoff? Well, sure. I met so many individuals who lost everything to Bernie Madoff too, and were underwater on their homes. I mean, individuals who were, I call it, repurposed in their positions because of being victims of age discrimination. So they got sort of nicely eased out of their job, and the chances of them finding employment that paid them the same as they made before, and they had refinanced their home. So it's definitely a different set of hardship stories, really sad ones, divorce, individuals refinancing their home to pay for care of a sick child. In a lot of cases, I had a lot of individuals who had children with cancer where the benefits sort of started running out, and they had to refinance their home in order to pay for care for their children. So it was a humanitarian effort. And with everyone who I was able to help in selling their home through a short sale, my commitment to them was that in the next 3 to 5 years, if they so desire, to help them become homeowners again. And in that, it developed sort of like a niche to the niche, which was actually going to court for my clients, not as an attorney, but as what I learned was a personal representative in stopping auctions like 24 hours before it happened and sharing with them information on the market to the judges and to some of the mediators they had in the court system.
Yeah, you would accompany the people to settlement conferences, right?
Correct.
And talk to the referee, right?
Correct.
And yeah.
So, and then I got a little name in that arena, and I really feel really touched and happy when someone met me and said, "Oh, I know you. You're the short sale queen." And I was like, "Is that what I'm being called? I didn't even know that." So it's really, really impressive when your colleagues and the market gives you a title that you didn't assert for yourself, but through your sheer performance, they put you in a certain category. So yeah.
What we say about ourselves, I often say, is marketing. What we hear about ourselves from others is reputation. And, it's quite an evolution to go from the perception of a real estate agent of, glorified chauffeur, right? Which, people don't know until they know, to really doing God's work. Because there's a couple thoughts I have about the short sale world and what we learn in it, and what you rightly point out about persons of color being adversely affected disproportionately, because you can see like the line from predatory lending all the way to a short sale being promulgated when the market or personal circumstances go south.
Yeah.
You can really see it. And it's funny. We've had 7-figure short sales, you and I.
Yes.
We've had very inexpensive short sales. Some short sales, a well-off guy, not exactly wearing an ascot, but people that have worked hard, done well in the world. I remember one guy was in the printing business. He had a $1 million house. Just to keep his printing business going, he refinanced his house, got a second mortgage, really believed in his brand, and then the market shit the bed, and his printing business went down. His everything went down, and here he is, middle-aged guy, and no predatory lending involved, but rough circumstances. Whereas I would have people, and yeah, we're talking about not wearing ascots, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we're doing God's work. These were people that were put into subprime loans, not given the full picture. They didn't use their house as ATMs. And they got caught in the undertow of a brutal economy that no one deserved.
Yeah, it was interesting because when I was going through, when I was in the eye of the storm, so to speak, when I would speak to individuals outside of real estate about what I was doing, many had, I would say, an apathetic, sort of callous attitude, believing that many of the individuals who are underwater were simply individuals who should not have been buying a home in the first place. And that was so far from the truth. I literally saw individuals who had very substantial down payments and yet were put into a loan that was adjustable rate and all of this type of stuff that they really shouldn't have been packaged into. Yeah. But the way it was sold to them was that this was better for them, and they lost everything.
They lost everything.
And
Yep.
that it was literally, it was criminal.
It's criminal. Yep.
What happened in many of these cases. I mean, there were some people who were in over their head, and yet it had to do with education on owning a home. And simply, if they had been educated, and they still could have been put into a different mortgage package, that
Absolutely.
they would not have gone down that specific route. Like, it would, especially since the interest rates was still so low.
Yeah.
At that time, it was so unnecessary. But they put them in the things with balloon payment. I mean, it was just really sick. Or they had them add more closing costs when they had money for closing costs, so it wasn't really even necessary. It was pretty tragic what I saw happen to people. And then, like you said, what I found is, in working with the short sales, at a certain point in time, I was so practiced, meaning I had so many short sale packages in, then individuals from different walks of life were coming to me, especially in the higher price point, because I had done so many. So they wanted someone who wasn't a novice. And and like I said, that's how I met somebody too, who he was a stockbroker but lost his job. Another one, their business went down. Another one was a dentist, and then he got sick. I had a person who was a heart surgeon, but he himself had a heart attack, and so no longer could practice surgery. So his income, like, all he could do was teach. And at that point, like, it could not even nearly cover what his salary was, even teaching in med school. Like, it his life just took a total turn, and many individuals like that. So the
stories behind short sales are, in my experience, some of the most compelling real estate stories that I have ever run into. I had one guy who was a World War II vet, lied about his age, got in the Navy, and was on the USS Missouri when the Japanese surrendered.
Oh my goodness.
And like you said, his wife got sick. He refinanced the house that had long since been paid for. Oh, by the way, this is another cool thing about this guy. His son went to high school with who's the guy? Oh, you're gonna know. Dream On.
Dream On, that sang the song Dream On?
Yeah.
Oh, you mean from Led Zeppelin?
Is it Tim, help me out here. Who's the guy? This is going to drive me crazy. I'm having a senior moment here. I'm not having an aneurysm, though. We're not have a stroke on the Dude Looks Like a Lady. Is another one of their songs.
Oh, you told Mick Jagger? Is that Dude Looks Like
Steven Tyler? Yeah. So his
Steve
son,
Tyler, Aerosmith. Here we go.
He introduced me to his son, who was clearly disabled, and that was another issue that he had. So his son had a bad drug trip back in the 70s, but he used to jam in that basement with Steven Tyler.
Oh my goodness!
In that basement of that house, because Steven Tyler is from Yonkers. Stories we learn. So yeah, real estate agents that do short sales, to me, are doing, and I'm not even exaggerating, they're doing God's work. And you remember that time we were driving down to the city to go to the Chase short sale symposium or whatever they were having? And that was really surprising to me, because at that point, my attitude about the banks and short sales was they were far unnecessarily too adversarial. And you guys get up there, and remember he said, an exit with dignity.
Yes. Yeah.
And just about everything those guys said was reassuring, except the part when we said to them, what do you do when a BPO comes in at an absurd number? And he's like, yeah, I can't help you there.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, which we still deal with, yes.
Sorry, can't help you with the high BPO. Okay, so short sales, to a large degree, kind of saved both of our bacon, because it was, like you said, it was the market of the moment. It was really the market of the Olympiad. It was the market of the 4 years,
Yes.
And Mark Boylan, that reminds me, I wrote him down because we gotta get him on here. Do they come any better?
No, they don't come any better.
They really don't. They really don't come better. Then we're fast forwarding here. seem to recall you got a little involved with the Real Estate Association.
Yeah, I got a little involved. So,
What was first?
after years of, actually working in the business, um, for quite a long time, and my broker of present, Gary Leogrande, had been encouraging me to get involved in the industry of real estate, which is a little bit different. It's not just the day to day. It's what keeps us employed. It's homeowners' rights. It's tenant and landlord rights. It's land use. It's many different things. And he thought that I would be a great voice. And at the time, I think like a lot of people, I'm like, I don't think I have the time. I got to make money. Right? I have to focus on like basically having a practice. And so I did lift my head up and I said, okay, well, I am going to volunteer my time to the association. So it started as me applying to be one of the board of directors. That transitioned into me becoming a secretary and thus an officer of our association, which then further went on for me to become the president of our association. And I was the second African-American person, or as I like to define, Black person, to actually lead our organization of one of the biggest metropolitan areas with 14,000 members, covering, our association covers up, to Orange County, Rockland, down to Manhattan as at present. And in that also came a lot of committee work. I was on a presidential advisory group for DEI, and also fair housing, and our realtors political action committee, RPAC. So there was a lot of involvement, and I got to see what was going on, which specifically in our particular state was an attack on homeowners' rights for certain. Mm-hmm. And things being put into place that would definitely make real estate even more inaccessible to a lot of our neighbors and friends. And I wanted to be in part of protecting that. And actually also too, our ability to be independent contractors, us being taken out of the transaction when we're essential, especially in one of the oldest parts of the country. So yeah, a lot of work there.
All right. So the first thing I want to ask you about, so you were on the board of directors. I want to fast forward just a little bit. Tell me about the experience of being president of the association.
Well, it was interesting, especially because I was a president in the midst of COVID.
Yeah.
Which the pandemic blew our mind. It started during the president before me, Gail Fatizzi. I was her successor. And we were still battling a lot of processes to operate under this pandemic environment.
Yeah.
So many of my meetings, everything was virtual. So even my installation was a virtual event, which was of its first.
I remember.
I heard mine was better than even a NYSAR president's installation, just saying. And shout out to Gary Connolly and the rest of the team on making that happen at HGAR.
They're the best.
So because of it, it meant that I had to be, I think, even more engaging because I had to come through this conduit of a screen for the first time ever. So it meant different skills. In addition, I think we had more meetings, incidentally, because there was not the travel time. So there were many days where I was sitting in my chair, like really for like 8 hours straight, just going from one meeting to the next. Because everything was in a virtual environment. So engagement became, which is always a challenge under any presidency, literally became heightened. Is how do you keep people interested, involved? How are you relevant? And my platform was the American Promise, which is different from the American Dream, because my thought process is that in order to be dreaming, you have to be asleep. And I don't want to be asleep. I don't think any of us want to. And the idea of being able to buy a property and own land is a promise of what I believe should be and is a promise of actually truly working hard, and any and all impediments to people being able to achieve that must be recognized and removed.
Yeah.
Otherwise, we're really not committed to people living their best life.
I think the American Promise is a more apt term, quite frankly. I don't know. I never use the sleeping analogy. I like that. It's a good one-liner. But I never used that one. But yeah, the American Promise. I really do like that. And so there's a couple things that I'm curious about. The experience of being president sometimes is thankless because you're a big kind of target for everybody who thinks that the president who presides over things somehow has magical powers to fix their specific issue, for example. And then there's just people that call you because they found your phone number and they want to complain.
Yeah, so I got all of that in between. The amount of calls I got about lock boxes or membership dues were pretty substantial, and I was like, "Oh, I'm surprised by that." I wouldn't think. Let me call the president of the organization for that, or even how do I become a realtor? Definitely became. Sometimes I would get calls or on that, or someone doing something inappropriate on the MLS in terms of how they listed their square footage or not allowing a showing. So I would get calls for that.
Yeah, we're the listings police.
Yes, exactly. And I was like, okay, well, that's not particularly my function, but I can direct you to whose function it is. So yeah, you definitely have that. And then there was I also had individuals who will really reach out to me because as a president, you have to write an article once a month.
Yeah.
And it was surprising how many people were reading the articles and who would reach out to me with personal emails or actually calls just to share their thoughts and feelings about things that I wrote. So that was impressive to me to know that I was touching our organization in that way. And some of the articles I wrote all related to real estate, but brought into it my personal story, because also as a president, I was coming in on the heels of what is being defined as the reckoning of America. Mm-hmm. So it was on the heels of George Floyd.
Yeah.
And it was then too that as an agent and as an agent of color, I was even more impacted in the sense that I couldn't believe that something like this could still happen after all this time. And it was a moment in time where America's attention wasn't filled with so many different distractions or the hurried anxieties of life. Yeah. So you had an apt audience to watch what happened. And regardless of what you believe about it, still a person died.
Yeah.
And it made me really say, like, I have to go to the next level in my own personal life and mission to make this a better America for myself and my children, and for my children's children and my friends.
Yeah. So I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you also were president when the Newsday story broke, or you came directly on the wake of the Newsday story.
Yes, I was absolutely on the wake of that. And as such, as president, I had the opportunity of interviewing Bill Dedman, who was the facilitator of that investigation. And we were able to have an apt dialogue about what is still happening in real estate, which is discrimination based upon race and ethnicity. Yeah. And it was apropos and pretty poignant that it still is happening in a state that is considered a very liberal state and a very diverse state, but yet nearly 50% of the time, Blacks or African Americans were being discriminated against. In the high 30%, Latinx or Hispanics, and nearly 20% of Asians.
Yeah.
This would still happen modern day. It's like it's not 1965. This is not the 1800s. This is right now. Right now.
No, this is it was 2019.
Yes. So, you can't say, oh, that's back in the olden days. No. And to see my colleagues steer was heartbreaking. What I thought was even more poignant was that some of those agents were actually people of color themselves.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and also being able to interview Richard Rothstein as well, because we did actually a summit about fair housing, and Bill Dedman, as well as Richard Rothstein, yep, the color of law, were my guests. And Richard Rothstein outlining that it's not a fabrication, it's not a myth, it's not conjecture, it's not a ploy from the far left of liberalism. It's a real government policies that were put into place that facilitated and orchestrated segregation in the United States. It's not make believe. So when
Absolutely not.
Yeah, when we have this conversation about systemic racism, that was a system in which racism was executed in disenfranchising a group of people.
Yeah. In a year where when we were kids, we thought we would be like the Jetsons, where we thought that we are living in a year where as kids, we thought the future would be like on TV, like in 2020, we're gonna,
cars.
Yeah, our cars are gonna fly. They're gonna be fueled by banana peels and tin cans. We're all gonna be together and post this and everything like that. And no, it was just like going back to another time, another sad Jim Crow level of time. And I think what made it more insidious was the fact that they were so blasé about doing it. They were so comfortable about doing it. And I got to tell you, as a broker, to see some of the brands defiantly double down on the events instead of saying, whoa, okay, yeah, this is bad. We take responsibility for this. This agent is no longer with the brand. We're going to retrain all of our agents. It's on us. Some companies did that, but some companies were like defiant and like it's entrapment and it's out of context. There's like 500 or 300 hours of video.
Yeah.
Show me the lack of context.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And the thing is too, when I looked at some of the agents and the comments they were making, they really, some of them, although misguided, they really thought they were being helpful. And that's the thing that was like, whoa, they thought they were being helpful.
No.
And in it, like we can batter agents all day, but it really was a social commentary.
It was.
Right? It's a social commentary because there's what realtors do, but there's also consumer expectation. So that's why the issue of racism and diversity it's a bigger issue in terms of our perception of the world. So a lot more education has to happen because even though we're licensed professionals, realtors are still members of the public.
Yeah.
And so there's like a bigger charge in terms of educating the public as well as holding our members and licensees accountable.
So let's talk about that. So one of the consequences or one of the downstream events that came out of this is that the structure of diversity, equity, and inclusion, long overdue, became center stage, at least in our association, and I think certainly in the state. Okay. DEI at that point was, one of those acronyms we'd hear about. And it was, from where I sit, and let me tell you, when I'm in a closed room, when you look like this, they think it's okay to say anything to you. And I just, observe. But DEI, I can tell you 10 years ago was a fringy, hippie kind of compensatory justice type of abstract, ultra-liberal thing. Shouldn't be. In the world of housing, with, there's so much downstream consequences of not just the real estate practitioners' problems. The Code of Ethics had racist language in it years ago.
Right.
FHA guidelines had racist language in them up until Fair Housing Act in the mid-'60s, right? Long overdue. But talk to me about how diversity, equity, and inclusion became something that you picked up the mantle with and worked on.
So I would say that DEI was definitely in my blood and is a part of my family mission before it was a thing.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just about how we showed up and presented in the life. You presented in life. If you know about African American history or Black histories, there's different schools of thought about how do we as Black people become empowered. Yeah. And if you look back to the works of W.E.B. Du Bois or Booker T. Washington and Frederick Douglass, there were different thoughts. Like one way is to do it through education.
Yep.
And the other way is to do it through kind of working hard, working in with your hands, in trades, in agriculture. And this is the way we elevate as a people. And my family came from both schools of thought on both sides, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's how we chose our career. It's the rooms we chose to be in. It's it's where our interests, like our interests weren't just in things that would be sort of defined as Black, like who even made up these definitions. It's like challenging that, like who gets to say what's Black, right? Who gets to say that? Like if I listen to opera, does that make me less Black than anybody else? Right? So it's in that we're being sort of disruptors and actually presenting ourselves was really the mission was that I'm an American first and then I'm a Christian, right? And to actually lead with that sort of mindset and everything else will fall into place.
So I'm going to add another name to your list there because he's had a big impact on me is James Baldwin.
James Baldwin. Yes, I am not your Negro, right? So, and the works and looking at the speeches and when he went to England, like all of this stuff was contextually in my family. My family was a lot about education. My grandfather on my dad's side was an educator teaching English in a time where that was not really
a Black possible thing to do.
Right. It wasn't right. It was, and it was a very different time. So he was revolutionary in his space. Right.
What did he?
He taught English. My grandfather on my father's side. Right. And
locally, like around here?
Yeah, actually down in Harlem.
Got it. Okay.
Yes,
gotcha.
It's where he taught. And then my grandfather on my mom's side, he worked for Con Edison. And my grandmother on my mom's side was one of the first individuals of color on the Board of Education for New York City.
Really?
Yes. So that's in my blood. But I didn't necessarily tout that as like a label. I just
news
lived.
To me. You certainly haven't touted it because it's news to me.
Right. So these are things that, so not everybody really knows that. But when this happened, it meant that I had to come out in a different way. Because for those who don't know that it's an issue because it's not their reality, how do I bring it into the present to help them understand that this is not a philosophy in the terms of a theory, it's a reality. So I had to bring reality. Right. I had to bring my own story, like to bring my own story and say, my grandmother and grandfather on my mom's side served our country in World War II. And when the GI Bill came out, it was not available to them because they were Black. That's not a hypothesis, that's real. And that made a difference in where my grandparents could live.
Yeah, that changes the whole trajectory of generational fate.
110%.
You can't say out of one side of your mouth, you reap what you sow, and then deny the consequences of that kind of bullshit.
Yeah. So I oftentimes I hear individuals say, well, you know what? Well, we worked hard. And and at times that becomes like a euphemism as to say a whole group of people, Black people didn't work hard. I'm like, but consider this, consider getting a degree and getting your PhD and not being able to use it because you're Black. What is that? Has absolutely nothing to do with work hard. You're working hard and then you're being denied access, right? Okay. Or you can only work in a school where there are other people of color. You can't work in a school that has a white constituency that's the majority. You can't,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That's not fair. Or they won't sell you a house in a certain neighborhood, or you have to go outside of a realtor because a realtor is not going to actually work with you. You have to go to an owner yourself, and maybe you have to use a straw buyer, somebody who presents as white, your white friend, to kind of negotiate the deal, but yet you're the one moving in. This is the reality of experiences that my family had. Okay.
And wealth, by the way, was not a cure for it, because I've read the stories of Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Jackie Robinson. We are talking about the household names, superstar, Hall of Fame baseball players, millions of fans. Willie Mays could not buy a house in San Francisco.
That's right.
Hank Aaron had nightmares buying his home. Uh, Jackie Robinson, who lived in Greenwich, by the way, and Rachel, it was Rachel, his daughter. I read her biography. It was fascinating. But yeah, these guys, they had brutal difficulties.
Yes,
buying property.
And to see, as we were discussing, to fast forward in 2019 that we still have the same challenges, it meant that I couldn't be silent. I had to be a little more present and seen in helping our neighbors, friends, and colleagues understand that this is a real issue that still needs to be addressed. And I also thought I was in a unique position, being that, yeah, at that particular point in time, I was at a center point in my life where I had equally lived a portion of my life, 2 decades, in predominantly neighborhoods of color, and now have also spent another 2 decades in neighborhoods where I was the clear minority, right? Where they're 85%, 90% of another group, which also allowed me to be in different rooms where certain things were said that was maybe would not have been said if I wasn't there, but there was a comfort level.
Yeah.
And so I was like, and I realized that there's just a real clear lack of understanding. So when I, for those that you know me, so since I'm in an interracial relationship and he has children from a previous marriage, and going to a park in the center of Westchester and being confused as the nanny, like that didn't happen in 1965. That just happened in 2016, right? and having these experiences happening, or being treated or spoken to a certain way, or not even being acknowledged at times, or people being confused because my name is Crystal and there's a whole association with that, and maybe if I had a different name, maybe I wouldn't have actually gotten a call back or an interview, or all of these things. Like, those are real experiences. It's not something that is in my imagination. And to share that with individuals, much less other things that happen on a daily basis, that makes my life a little harder than others. Yeah. So, and feeling that into the realm of real estate, because during a certain couple of years here, I started having certain experiences that I found frightening, where for the first time in real estate, neighborhoods where I serviced years like before, there was a portion of time where individuals felt fine to come at me and say, well, what are you doing here? Which had not, like, honestly, it hadn't happened before. But all of a sudden, there was this energy of empowerment where I was having experiences that were racist. And there were always what our term microaggressions that happened, but some of these became more blatant, aggressive actions.
Yes, some of them weren't very micro, right? I mean, this goes beyond housing. This is pervasive. Right. Even in pain management and medicine, there's absolutely documented evidence scientific, empirical, proven evidence that the amount of pain meds given to black patients are less than those given to white patients because there's some baloney about their pain threshold. Or the
Yep, I can raise my hand. That's happened to me, and I've had to advocate. And
yeah,
right. And then it was like insulting that my husband has to step into the room, and then it's like, oh, now they're going to take what he says seriously. You know, it was so demoralizing.
That's brutal. That's brutal.
Right.
And then the anecdotal things, but certainly disturbing, where the appraisals have come in low because, you know, it was a black person's house and maybe their art, or I don't know, but then they whitey it up and all of a sudden the appraisal comes back $100,000 higher. Like, what changed?
Right.
Come on.
I mean, yeah, and you're impacting people's ability to live. I mean, this is money in which they'll use to pay for their children's educations.
Yeah, that's college tuition right there. That's
right. Right. So it's an infringement upon people's constitutional rights.
Absolutely. So this is not, you know, sort of like a, you know, hobby. You know, this is a vocation, an avocation, a you know, profoundly important driving force behind what it is that you do. And yeah, the downstream long-term consequences of these things are real. These are not simply social faux pas. These are generationally affecting matters, because, you know, if my grandfather had an extra $100,000, what would that be in today's dollars?
Right. What would that be? What would that be, honestly?
So what is your current role with DEI, with the association? So we've had a DEI person for, I think, 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah, so it's just about 2 years, and his name is Fredemir Garcia. We actually have an officer working as staff for the Hudson Gateway Association of Realtors, and we were really the first to implement that in New York State. And that's going to be where the hope is that's going to be a trend and an adaptation for all the associations as we move forward in this landscape. And so, to the commitment of bringing more diversity into our association, I have been appointed as the New York State Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer, and this is first of its kind. And it's a committee, and the committee consists of representatives from every association in our state. And the goal here is to help individuals understand the difference as well as the similarities between diversity, equity, and inclusion and fair housing, because they're two different issues, but they work intrinsically with one another. As we move into this changing landscape, which is our country and our state. So there are studies that show that by 2045, the United States of America will be a minority majority. So that means that our clients and customers will be almost half and half individuals of color. How do we service those groups? And it's not even just individuals of color, because a part of the education of diversity, equity, and inclusion is that it's not just about Black and white, which is the framework in which a lot of Americans tend to think about diversity. It's also ethnicity. It's also religion. It's also gender expression. It's gender orientation. It's family structure. It's abled. It's differently abled. And to make sure that we're having these conversations and that the right people are at the table actually weighing in, so that the needs of all are being met. And that if there are barriers, what are we doing to remove those barriers so that everyone truly has equal opportunity? So there is this concept, though, that's out there that, you know, we believe in equal opportunity, but not necessarily equal outcome. And I think on the surface, that's understandable. But if you don't understand the intrinsic association between the barrier, then you don't understand that equal outcome is not even possible.
Yep, that's correct.
It's not possible. if there's
Yeah.
certain barriers in place,
Yep.
because we haven't even gotten to equal opportunity yet.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
we do have to look at the lead, the lag indicators in terms of what's actually been able to be achieved and experienced, what the outcomes are, to actually look at what the precursor or the circumstances are that might be interfering with those outcomes. Right.
Well, I got to tell you, I think they've got the right person on the job. It's trite to say that you're passionate about this. It really is. It's a silly, silly understatement. But I think it goes back to how you share that this is really in your professional DNA. Going back to just how the market of the moment, short sales, which is kind of like a business decision, but oh, by the way, this is helping more people in the community who need it, people of color, victims of predatory lending, etc., kind of evolves over time, and not too much time, really, 10, 15 years, to running the state association's program to make people aware of this. And I kind of think you're the right person at the right time for this. That's for damn sure.
I feel
Um,
honored. I feel
I
honored
do
by
want.
you saying that, because it's a
Oh,
tough space. It means that we have to
oh,
have uncomfortable conversations. And I think that the talent, if you would permit me, that I feel that I bring to the table is that this is not about shaming people.
no, of course
It's
not.
not.
Education, right? I
It's
mean,
about education. It's about a conversation that leads us to action where we feel comfortable working together. And not everyone has the skill set to talk about uncomfortable things without being condescending or aggressive. And I think that I bring to this a level of passion and understanding that I truly believe everyone is my equal. And so when you truly internalize equality across the board, when you talk about hard things, I think it conveys a different energy that I see you. And what I'm inviting you to do is to see me. And let's
yeah,
work together to accomplish something that's better for all of us.
yeah, absolutely. And it does raise the tide for all boats. All boats get risen. All
Mhm.
right, so I'm going to talk about something else that you're passionate about, perhaps even more passionate, and that is that you are a mama. And one of the great things about this is seeing you preside over association meetings with a baby.
Yes,
And
I know. I ran a lot of meetings with so crumb snatches on my leg, which was definitely a surprise and a curveball. I don't mind sharing because I find that is more strength in doing so. To struggle with infertility, as I have, and for those who are warriors out there, my heart goes out to you. I'm
yeah,
with you, a sister in arms. And
yeah,
so we went through the path of fostering and adoption. So essentially, the curveball upon becoming president is I had a baby dropped in my lap in the midst of it, and then that turned into two babies. And there is no greater love than to love a child. I tell you, if you haven't had the experience, you can't compare it to anything.
you can't.
You can't compare it to anything. And definitely some of the things that happen to your body, to know the power of nature and what a body can do, even if you haven't given birth, that allows you to be a caretaker and to bond with that child, is absolutely exceptional and brings you into the space of God. That is what I can say on that. It's pretty intense. And so I have two little crumb snatchers, that to watch them every day, the little things that they do. I mean, if you blink, you miss it. If you blink, you miss it. And I mean, I'm glad I'm a little older.
Youth is wasted on the young.
Yes, I know youth is wasted on the young. So I definitely have a different level of patience at at this age that I think is instrumental in me having this experience. And I love seeing those faces as the first face I see when they like wake up, when they see mine and they're smiling, as well as when they go to sleep. And you really get even more centered about what's important.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You start wanting to be an architect of a better world for them.
Yeah. And that became right. And it became even more real about what am I doing to make this place better for them? Yeah. What am I doing?
Yeah.
I have to do something.
So what you have articulated what I have observed, which is the joy you take in being a mom is something that I can look at like a beautiful sunset. It is just the greatest thing. And I know that it's not all optics, because the other side of that is being dog tired and having 3 more hours of work to do.
Yes. Yes.
Being like the Walking Dead tired, and you still find in your marrow somewhere maybe a little extra coffee.
Definitely a little extra coffee.
Cry a little bit, whatever you got to do. But to just deal with, it's the happiest kind of tired there is, but there is a tired that goes with this that is really hard for me to imagine that, generations ago, or even my mother and her friends, where like they were all alone.
Yeah, hello. I think about that. My mom was my dad was in a position that my mom was a stay-at-home mom for most of our life. And I think about even just doing that, like two kids at home all day, every day. But she was very disciplined. I mean, and not necessarily having the help, like you said, or some of the modern conveniences, because we grew up in a city, and for a time we didn't have a car. So I think about my mom having my brother strapped to her, and then me, and lugging strollers on trains and buses to go where she had to go, or hailing like that, next level, and still having dinner on the table and the house clean.
Yeah.
Right. And then I look at my mother-in-law, who had 5 kids, all under the age of 7 at one point. Could you imagine? And no nanny.
I actually can, because we had 4 under 6 at one point. But that's like Olympic level like performance right there.
And that's why I want to thank you for allowing us to have date night. And I'm gonna use your services again and stepping as a friend and being a babysitter.
Happily do it again. Allison wasn't able to make it that night, but Kat did. And I will. I had more fun than you did.
I think so.
I really did. I had more fun. So this is the kind of grandpa I want to be. I'm going to share this with you. It's going to probably going to be a long time before I'm a grandpa. But when I am a grandpa, I'm going to go to my kids and say, go to bed, and I got this tonight. So from midnight to 6, I'm on shift. And because hopefully at that point I will not have to wake up at 8 a.m. or 7 a.m.
Right, exactly.
Right to bed. But I would be grandpa night nurse. I think would be the best thing a grandpa could do for the kids. So I told you that this would go by quickly.
Yeah.
And it shot by. It is now noon. How do we reach you? Oh, there we are. Tim.
So yes, if you want to reach me, you can email me at crystal@crystalclearre.com, and my telephone number is 914-309-2851. And I make real estate crystal clear. So
yes, you do. Yes, you do. And you are still an associate broker with KW, right?
Yes, I am.
And you are one of the finest licensees that I know. You're one of the great leaders in our industry, and I don't mean like locally. I mean, you are one of the great leaders in our industry, and I'm honored that that you came on today, and let's do lunch again soon.
Oh
Okay?
yeah, I would love that. That would be awesome, man.
All right.
Thank you so much.
We will do that. Thank you. All right, Timothy, take it away.